Hello, Legacy Sabers. Marsh here. So today we're going to talk about comments in Python. Um, Today is kind of a short lesson, though it's not a lot of information. But one thing I want to show you is a program that I have written out here. And take a look at it quick. See what this program is for. So just try to figure out what is this program doing. There's definitely some math, right? So we see area, so maybe it's area of something, but area of what? We get some inputs. They're all three int values. So this program, as it stands, is kind of hard to figure out what it's for, right? It's difficult for us to figure it out because it's not labeled. It doesn't give us information. So our focus today is how can we make sure people understand what a program is for? Introducing dun da 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 comments. Well, ultimately, comments is just text in a program that is ignored by the program. It's for the human, the programmer, that is reading it. So here's the exact same program that I just had above or before this, but I put some comments to explain it. So notice I have comments here, right here. I have a comment here, and I also have a comment here. So now this program computes the area of a trapezoid. Oh, well, that would have been useful on the first slide, right? And then I mark in that I asked for the lengths of the base of the top, and then I also compute the area of the trapezoid. So notice what I'm doing. I'm basically labeling what the code below does, right? So I'm basically giving the reader, the programmer that's reading my program later, hey, you don't have to actually read the code because this is what I believe the code to do. Now, there are different kinds of comments. There is something called a multi-line. Some might call it a block comment. It's surrounded by three quotation marks and can span multiple lines. So for example, I have a multi-line comment down here. Notice it has three quotation marks starting it and three quotation marks ending it. That is how you can show that you have a multi-line comment. Anything you put in between these quotation marks will count as a inside the comment. The computer will avoid and not use that information. So this is usually used for multiple lines. Maybe you have a lot of long paragraph to type in. Maybe you have a lot of information to use. Some people will put it at the beginning of their program to describe what the program does and who wrote it. It's very common to have an author line at the top of your program just because consider the fact that most programs are updated. And as the updates are happening, you will also find that there is updates listed in here and who did the update so that the person who's now working on the program can possibly go back to the last person and say, hey, I was wondering why this exists in the program, or why wasn't this ever changed in the program so that people can see it. So ultimately, we do have the multi-line comment at the beginning of the program to describe what it does and who wrote it. And then there's something called a single line comment. That's when you want to only mark in a single line. And it begins with the pound sign, or those of you that call it the hashtag. The hashtag is for every single line. But the problem with the single line comment versus the block comment, every single line comment has to begin with the pound sign. So right here, I had to do the hashtag, ask for the length of the, and then I did another hashtag base and top. So if I didn't have this hashtag right here, that would not work. Every single line has to have that pound sign hashtag to show that you are writing a comment. A single line comment is more common when you are describing a single line of code. You're trying to explain what this line of code does or this certain block of code does. That's the most common times is you're trying to describe those specific parts of your code. Now, comments are super important. Always write comments. Reasons for it. programming is often done by teams of people. And a lot of times you have people working with one another, and those comments make programmers' jobs super easy because they don't actually have to read the code and decipher it. They can just read the comment and go, oh, that's what that code does. I don't have to read it because I know what it does. Consider also, like I just said earlier, projects you work on are inherited by other people. So the comments you leave help the future programmer so they know what you meant by your code. And also, it just makes it easier for you to read your own code because especially if we go back to our code, we want to be able to understand it. But keep also in mind, too many comments can make it worse to read. So if you comment every single line of code that you've ever written, it becomes kind of messy, to be honest. So we should have our comments help us read the program, but it shouldn't be too many comments to make it worse to read. So there is a kind of fine line that we walk as programmers to having too much comments to having just enough comments. Now, what am I expecting you in this class for comments? I'm expecting the following. At the top of your program, I'm going to ask you to put your name, the date you're working on this program, and the program's name. That is basically industry standard. So you're going to find that this is very industry standard. So if you would start a job at a particular programming place, they would ask you to do the name, the date, and the program name at the top. That can be a block comment with the triple quotation marks, or it could also be just hashtags for each thing. That way, you are labeling your program. It's kind of like putting your name on your paper, right? You're not going to be required to comment code itself. However, I found that some students remember what lines of code are for using comments. So, like sometimes above the input line, they'll go hashtag getting input from the user. And then hashtag figuring out the total amount or something like that. So then it helps the student remember what the lines of code that they just wrote, especially for posterity reasons. Maybe you're using that program to study later, or maybe you're using it for an example program. So the most common times you're going to see me comment code itself is when we're doing an example program in class. So that way you guys can see it later and use it for a reference. But the only thing I'm going to ask you to do required is the name, the date, and the program's name at the top of your program. And that is the end of this video. On Classroom, you should go and find the program under today's date. It's also on Google Classroom, the link, so that way you can get there. Until then, though, I will see you later, Savers.